And I mean, yeah, such a big idea. How did you tie that to? How did you, I guess, discover that you wanted to tell that story through this like guerrilla gardening, which I love that term, by the way, guerrilla gardening story. How did you tie those ideas together?
Yeah, I feel like all of my stories start with that really big thing that is painful, and then becomes distilled into the mundane. Like I feel like we can explore all of these bigger ideas in these tiny moments of the everyday, and I find like that's the only way I can break this down to be like, how do I actually process this emotionally, and how do I act, and how do I, move forward? And so that big idea kind of was distilled into land, obviously. And I live in Toronto, and so, I have this little balcony, which is like the biggest blessing of my life. And it has like 3 dead AC machines on it that are like cemented into the ground. And then my neighborhood, it's like a low income, like immigrant neighborhood, but it's becoming gentrified. And so like the backyards I look out onto are 2 like of those like families who have moved in, and one of them has like paved over their entire backyard, and the other one has like turf over their entire backyard. And I just have all my pots like everywhere trying to get the little corner of sunlight, and I'm just every day just like, what is happening? I feel like in a city who has access to land is so political. And yeah, especially like living on stolen land, the people who have access to land in a city like that where it's so expensive are often very privileged, or that has been passed down to them, or they're able to afford it. And there's like a lot of bylaws about planting. Like, for example, the strip between the sidewalk and the road, like you're not allowed to plant there. You can get in trouble with the city. And to me, that's insane, because like we're meant to be in connection to the land. That's how we remember who we are. And so I think, using land and being in connection to land and growing food you can eat and food sovereignty, like that's a radical act. And it's such a simple act, but it has like a huge, it goes back to that big context of land and connection to land and indigeneity. So yeah, I just feel like it's a simple way to explore those big ideas, I guess. Yeah,
absolutely. It came across really well. I also wanted to talk about, you have your 2 characters from different cultural backgrounds, but also from different generations, age-wise. What sort of drew you to that type of relationship?
So being someone in the diaspora and whose family is very fractured, and our stories are fractured just because of like the trauma around, like my family were survivors of the Nakba, and so they were refugees, and those stories it's really hard to keep passing down, like in any lineage where there's trauma, like it's tricky to keep passing down those stories, but it's so important for us to remember where we come from. And so living away from my family in Toronto, I feel like I really miss my elders, and I really like want aunties, like everywhere I go. So I get like adopted by aunties, and I'm so like happy. And so I found like working as an artist and in the community that I'm in, I've made a lot of connections with like Indigenous elders who are making art and have been activists for a really long time. And so I really cherish those relationships. And I was interested in exploring like what these 2 characters like need to learn from each other. That knowledge kind of goes both ways in a circle. And just that I think we're losing that connection, like in an increasingly like individualistic world, we're losing that. I think here in Newfoundland, it's like people really respect their elders, which I really love. Like the culture is it's like very rooted, but in a big city, sometimes we were losing that transfer of knowledge, and yeah, I'm just always longing for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in Newfoundland it's summed up as loves Nan.
Yeah.
Loves Nan. God loves Nan. So where is this story sort of in your filmmaking journey? And were there any like favorite parts that sort of set this film apart from your other work?
So this is my 3rd short film. I think every film I make, I'm healing. It's like another layer of healing. And yeah, just something that is stirring around that needs to be expressed. So I felt very blessed to be able to create this project and to now be sharing it with the world is like I'm so happy that it's happening at this time. In my creative journey, so I've leaned a lot more into comedy usually, and like very like awkward, uncomfortable, like more stylized. You still see those little moments in the film. So this, in terms of stylistically, I was leaning a lot more into trying to take things very seriously and be sincere, which is very terrifying. Like people who do drama, I'm like, how do you guys do it? It's so scary to me. Because comedy, you get an instant reaction from the audience. You know, okay, it landed, like people are enjoying themselves. Whereas with drama, like you don't know. They could be hating it. We don't know. So I think in terms of my journey in as a director, it was like leaning more into the sincere and really challenging myself to be vulnerable and be vulnerable without always like turning to humor to protect myself and my ego. And then it was also, preparing for a bigger project, a first feature, and leaning into exploring fracture and isolation and connection, but with a very simple story. Yeah.
Well, we can't wait to see that feature. I wanted to open it up to the crowd. Anybody have any questions? Yeah.
Okay, first of all, just to let you know that you completely pulled it off with sincerity. The scene where they were burying the fig tree sapling, I teared up. I think it was quite beautiful. Something I'm really interested in is that I noticed in the credits you credited story mentors, and I think it's interesting because it's a story about mentorship, and I kind of want to know more about how you incorporated that into the actual making of the film.
Oh my God, this is a very complicated question. I'm about to expose some stuff, y'all. I'll spill the beans. I don't care. So this project, as you'll notice, with the sponsors in the bottom, at the credits, and the logo off the top, was part of the Canadian Film Centre, their director's lab. So it's so interesting because, we're in a time where institutions are really trying to uplift diverse voices, but they don't always have like the structural changes needed to support the different stories that are coming in. So for the program, like all of our mentors were like Caucasian, and the story mentors, and I was telling obviously like an Indigenous and Palestinian story. So when I pitched it, I was like, hey guys, if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna need an Indigenous mentor who's paid along with the other story editors. Like they're amazing, writers and professionals in their field. But in order to tell this story, like I need to have an Indigenous like co-writer and mentor. And I was like, if I can't have that, I won't do this project. I'll save it for another time and I'll apply for grants. So I had to do a bit of fighting to which is really sad, to make that happen. But I just was like, I can't, this is my one point where I cannot like bend to the institution, like even though it's more difficult for them and whatever, blah, blah, logistics. I was like, I do not care. And I was like so stubborn, and I fought like a wild dog in order to work with Monique, who's the actor in the film. So she ended up working as my story editor and mentor, and then she also acted in the film because I really wanted that character to be like their character to be filled out by whoever was coming on board to help write the script. So the story wouldn't be what it is without her, and it was really a collaboration between both of us. And it's just so crazy. You have to like convince, these institutions, like they told me like, oh, well, will it even be your story anymore if you have like an Indigenous like mentor or co-writer? And I'm like, what? Like, I'm just so confused because you're okay with those other two people being my mentors, then it's still my story or something. Like it, so I don't know. It's just crazy that, you have to prove to an institution sometimes the basic things that are just like so basic. But inshallah that they are gonna learn from that experience and do better next time. But I think mentorship is really, really integral.
Well, thank you so much for coming and talking with us and for coming to the festival. We're so excited to have you in your film.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. I'm sorry I ended it on a note of tea, but thank you guys all for coming.
That's
and
what
I
we're
appreciate
here for.
y'all.
We love tea
being
in
here.
Newfoundland as well, all types, not just Tetley. Thank you. And I'd like to invite up the director of Kneaded, Stephen Coombs.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome and congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Tell me a bit about the sort of genesis of Kneaded. Where did this story kind of spring from?
Well, it's funny because like just watching it on screen tonight is very, I was saying earlier, like a very cathartic experience because the idea has lived in my brain for so long and then spent so much time kind of cultivating it in the dark and then sharing it in the dark on the screen, which was amazing. So I'd like to thank everyone. There's a lot of crew here tonight who came out of nowhere and and helped me make this film, and I'd like to thank them first made a lot of great new friendships. So congratulations, guys. Thank you.
Well done.
Yeah, so it's growing up, I had a very I'll say kind of a clinical childhood. Like I watched my mother take care of my grandmother, who lived a lot with us. She had a lot of long-term illnesses, and so mom was like her primary caregiver. We spent a lot of time playing in the health sciences and living off the vending machines and stuff like that, and seeing how how it affected my mom, and trying to also raise a family, and also being kind of like a de facto anchor for the family, kind of the person everyone goes to in the family. And also my wife, who's been a primary caregiver for her own mother and myself. We've had some medical issues in our life. That's why they made me this shirt. I got to do a shameless plug. Yeah, S4 Films. I kind of came up with this stage 4 because this is my 10th year now living stage 4 with cancer. Thank you. Yeah, so I've seen the effect it's taken on Ange. She has her own medical issues. She's here tonight, so thank you, honey. And my mother was here. She left because she doesn't love me. No, that's the comedy side coming out. Yeah, so I've seen the effect it's taken on, in particular, female primary caregivers in our culture. It's like we talked about in the Newfoundland culture. It's like love Nan, love your mom, and I've seen the effect it's taken on them and how it wears them down. So for a long time, I had this play idea that I wanted to do, and throughout the play, you would see the primary caregiver who interacts with the audience. You would see like a loss of light as she interacts with people and they leave, whether she's cutting their hair, giving them bread. Eventually, we see that she's given all that she can give, and it's very breaking spiritually and mentally, and that's kind of what I wanted to convey in the film. At the same time, just to seeing her live alone. She's been through so many losses in her life, losing a child, a husband, trying to keep family conflicts at bay, and at the same time looking after her own brother who mourns the loss of and feels the responsibility for the loss of her child. So yeah, there was a lot there that I wanted to put out there in that message, and that's kind of where the whole idea for it came from. Yeah.
And so you've been sitting with this idea and this script for such a long time, originally being a play and then bringing it into film. What was it like to sort of bring it out of that very solitary kind of writing phase and into this more like collaborative film experience?
It was amazing because, there's been many projects in my life. I did a stage show about my cancer, and initially my foray into film was trying to make that into a feature or a series. And through COVID, what we experienced with our isolation and having still living as a chemo patient, I had to find other avenues because, believe it or not, I'm a stand-up comedian. That's why I had to tip a hat when you talked about comedy earlier, because it's funny because as much as I root myself in awkward comedy and always use comedy to kind of get through trauma or difficult situations, at the same time, you know, if I'm going to the card store to buy a card for Mother's Day, you know, or Mom's birthday, it has to make her cry, or it's not worth the $8 I'm paying the homework, right? So yeah, you know, I had this idea. It was a play idea, and then when the Nickel had their story rating challenge in 2023, and they threw out the prompt, and it was twist, and I was like, oh, I can kind of take that idea I'm working on and put a little twist on the end, which is in the end we see what all this trauma and anguish that Rosemary has lived through leads to ultimately in the end, and that's how I decided to pursue it as a part of the script writing challenge. And then after doing my first film through the Introduction to Film workshop with NIFCO, and that was more of a comedic drama, but there was still some tears at the end of that one. But yeah, so then that inspired me to take part in NIFCO's first time filmmaker program. So it's pretty cool that after like 2.5 years, something that was born out of an idea, the germ of an idea, and the script writing challenge here, it gets to come full circle and come back to the Nickel and be featured on screen. So
We love to see it. It's a great, it's
Yeah.
a great plug for the challenges.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to take part. We love
Yeah,
to see
definitely,
it.
yeah.
Some really cool stuff, including this. Yeah, but I mean, we can't take very much credit because that was you. I do want to open it up to the crowd as well. Are there any questions for Steve? Yeah.
Was there anything about any substitutions at your table read that really inspired you to change the way you approach the film?
There was, Mr. Mike Hickey, thank you. As a matter of fact, when... What's that? No, well, actually, you know, part of the message behind the film is all about self-care. And when we went to do our first shoot back in December, one of our key crew members fell ill just shortly before the shoot, and I wanted to convey that message and say, you know, like, this is about self-care and it's about you taking care of yourself, so we're going to push the shoot date back. And we and I already had a table read just that week prior to, which led to a casting change. You know, from the table reads, leading up to our first table read, as much as you think you know what you're trying to convey and how well you've written your piece, like, I find the longer, it's kind of like when you're doing stand-up and you got an idea, you have coffee with your buddies and you're telling the story and you're seeing the laughs and you're getting the instant reactions and you know where the story's going and it's going to be good. And you sit with your script for so long, you get siloed. And once I got to the table read, I found what the actors brought into that first table read, where there was a lot of key conceptual points that I never really thought about in the story or how it would affect the outcome of the screenplay. Even something as simple as, you know, Dee Dee Rawlings was our first Rosemary prior to Fateema coming on. And Dee Dee's a baker, and she said, I'm telling you, she said, if you fuck with the bread, it's not going to rise. And we were going to have the poison in the bread, so we changed it to jam. But also, it's some of the questions that they come back in terms of even when Fateema in the second casting, and Mike brought up a key point about, you know, the side where in your story, your key character has made that decision that she's going to take her life, and she's going to take her brother's life as part of, you know, putting a resolve to this situation. And, you know, those were things that, like, really made me appreciate the actors even more, like what goes into acting and what they're actually putting forward more into what you've brought up as a concept to push me a little bit further and question the way I've written it. And even Mike sat in for our table read. Larry couldn't make the second one, and Mike gave me a great tip at the beginning. You know, initially the movie was going to open up with a lot of focus on her making the bread, because there's you know, so much of my mom in there, because it's what I watched my mom do growing up. And Mike brought up a great point about, you know, if you really want to save your film in the edit, think about doing this letter at, you know, shooting your film 2 ways with 2 openings. And I'm so grateful to Mike for saying that, because if he hadn't have suggested it, I wouldn't have had that option, and it ended up being the way that we opened the film. So thanks. Thank you, Mike. I owe you a beer.
Definitely a plant. Definitely a plant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming and chatting with us. Congratulations.
Thanks so much.
again on
Thanks
your
for
film.
having me. Thanks, everyone.
And we have another screening starting quite soon, so please, we hope we see you up there, and we'll see you for the rest of the week. Thanks for coming.